Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Coder Conversations. We've brought back our guest, Carl. Welcome back.
Well, thanks very much for having me again. I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, man, definitely had to get you back on, man. We had some interesting conversations after the last show, especially about the educational system and how we kind of believe it's failing current students.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have lots of opinions about the education system. So looking forward to discuss that some more.
Yeah, most definitely. Do you have a traditional background in computer science, like a degree at a university, or how did you break into the industry?
Yes, I do actually. So I studied artificial intelligence and robotics, which is basically just a fancy name for computer science if you take a bunch of specific modules at the university I went to. So yes, I did study that. I don't regret doing it. But if I could, I would change many things about the education system, from the
Sure. So yeah, so we don't completely trash like the university system. What are some of the positives that you've got from attending university?
Well, I'd say the main positive thing that I got from university actually has nothing to do with the course, and that's the connections that I made there. So I met my co-founder that I founded Revolancer with at university. I secured my first bit of seed funding through a university startup pitching competition, and they had a grant that was kindly donated by alumni from the university. I met lots of kind of initial contacts who connected me to other people at university. So in that regard, it was incredibly helpful. But as far as the course goes, again, I'm not saying that I didn't learn anything. I'm not saying that I didn't learn anything useful. But at the same time, I think especially with computer science, a lot of it you can teach yourself. And then, you really have to kind of think about, is it worth paying? Is it worth, kind of committing to a multiple year degree to learn something which, if you have the right kind of mindset and the right discipline, you could quite easily teach yourself with the free resources available online to a very large degree, if not beyond. So you really have to kind of think about whether that's worth doing. One other benefit, I suppose, of having a degree is in the job application process, it can give you a kind of a bump up. But speaking personally as a small employer, we employ a few people at Revolancer. Education is the last thing I look at. I always look at someone's mindset first. What interesting projects has someone worked on, be they as a part of education or outside of it? But I'm much more interested in that than what someone's educational background is. So yeah.
So do you believe companies are doing a pretty big disservice to to their hiring process by ignoring people who don't have the traditional university degree?
I mean, I think they're doing a disservice to the applicants, but even more so, they're doing a disservice to themselves, because I have, the best developers that I have met have been self-taught. Maybe they have a degree, but you kind of have to constantly be learning, and I've also met and interviewed many university graduates, computer science graduates who have kind of a high they passed with a first class degree, they got very good grades, but they just are not nearly good enough for the role. So we had to turn them down. So I disagree with what university tests and kind of how it's graded. I think it's a lot better than school. I really do, but I think it still has a long way to go.
Sure. So, like, if you can make some tweaks to the university system, how would they be able to better prepare these students to enter the job market?
Well, I think the main thing is, I remember I did a Haskell module at university, and as a part of the assessment for that, as a pretty large part of the grade for that module was writing Haskell code without access to the internet, without a book in front of you or anything, just with pen on paper, and you kind of had to write Haskell code, to fulfill specific function or whatnot. And I think that that is so disconnected from the real world, and that's maybe an extreme example, but I think generally you can apply that to a lot of university. The assessments are often how well can you remember things, whereas in the real world, in the modern real world, if you can just Google it quickly if you need to figure out how to do something. Programmers do that all the time. There is nothing wrong with that. It's much better than trying to memorize everything. You can never do that. So I think the test should be more around people's ability to problem solve. So I think the assessment should be more around, identify a problem that you are passionate about, and then figure out a solution for it. You can use the internet, you can use books, you can use whatever resources you want that you have access to, and then kind of assess based on that. I think that would be a huge step in the right direction.
Yeah, I agree. You mentioned before some of the candidates who came from these big universities, but they didn't quite have the skills necessary. What were they missing?
I mean, it's very much the problem solving. I don't want someone who can memorize things very well, because you're never going to memorize things better than a book can memorize things. It's a bit of a crude example, but it's a futile exercise. We have better storage devices than our minds that we can easily access information from. So, I mean, obviously learn some things, but it's more about developing a gut feel, and developing your problem solving ability, which I believe that these candidates kind of lacked. So they got 90-95% or whatever in a university exam around web development, but then when we actually test them and we put them on the spot and give them a coding challenge, they just do terribly, because it's so different from what university tests them on, but it's actually more useful for the real world.
Yeah, I do agree that there's a huge gap between what these real world jobs require and what these universities teach. It's almost like they're in their own isolated bubble, and they'll teach a lot of good theory and stuff, but when it comes to actually being prepared for the job, there's sort of a gap there.
Yeah, absolutely.
How would you recommend like a student fill that gap?
Well, I'd say work on projects that you're passionate about in your kind of spare time, because getting a degree and doing well in a degree, can be incredibly useful. I personally don't really put much weight on that when I interview people, but I know that I am definitely the exception in that regard and not the rule. Many companies do, when they initially screen candidates, look at where they studied, what kind of grades they got, what their degree title is, which I think is a shame, but it's the reality. So, I'm not saying you absolutely need to get a degree, but if you are going to university and are getting a degree, there's nothing wrong with that. But spend time, working on things you're passionate about. Develop your own projects. Make sure you meet people at university, because, like I said, that's what helped me the most. I met some incredible people, who were absolutely pivotal in starting my business at university. Would I have been able to meet good people outside of university? Yes, I'm sure I would have, but I met good people at university, because I think probably the best thing about university, in my opinion, is that you get people, you get kind of a large group of people who are talented, who have specific interests, kind of together, under one roof, metaphorically speaking, who you can all talk to. And, maybe in a couple of years, some of these people will be inaccessible. They'll be earning, kind of crazy salaries. They'll be at some other job, but maybe for now you can get them involved in working on a project together. So I think there are lots of opportunities at university, but I think you'd be wasting your time if you're only focusing on, getting the best possible grade and memorizing the most stuff from a textbook. If that makes sense.
Exactly. Something I'm finding, especially as my career progresses and as I explore the opportunities, is that soft skills really matter. And, nobody really teaches that. Like you mentioned, the ability to network, reach out to people. How would somebody develop those skills? Because, the university, or there's not really anywhere that really teaches that, except maybe a couple of books or random YouTube videos.
Well, I've actually got a pretty funny story. that I kind of learned from a friend of mine at university, which kind of shows how, someone who is doing what might maybe initially think is a terrible idea actually works out in the end. And that's that a good friend of mine from university, his dad studied at the same university, probably like 20, 25 years earlier. And this friend's dad, from what I heard, basically spent a lot of time partying, spent a lot of time drinking. He did not really do much university work. He just about scraped by. But one thing that he did do is he developed really good friendships and connections with all of the best computer science students. And then after he graduated, he found basically this was in the 90s, and the internet was kind of a new thing that different companies were adopting to. And he approached a large financial institution and basically convinced them to give him a contract to help bring them online, which was a large contract. And then he sort of went to these really good computer science students, who had now graduated, who he was friends with, and employed them to deliver the work. And this guy now owns 3 financial services software companies. 2 of them are regulated. Incredibly successful guy, But if you think about it, at university, he didn't really pay attention. He was just drinking and partying the whole time. But still, he is now probably much more successful than the vast majority of his peers. So, sometimes it's more about kind of who you get to know than what you learn necessarily. So I'd say that the soft skills are incredibly important, and the best way to develop them is to just go and talk to people and show a genuine interest.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that's, software engineers, a lot of times we just like to sit there, do the problem, and kind of disassociate from everybody. And, it helps us focus. But ultimately, if we just stay in that little bubble, it develops into kind of a weakness if we're unable to relate to others.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like I've been talking to a couple of people, and they've actually mentioned to me like they meet a lot of their connections at cigar lounges. So
Yeah, I mean, it's this is slightly outside of the kind of coding scope, but basically, one thing that I always say, I've been told that I'm really good at networking. I in many ways disagree, but I can see why people say that, because I'm not the kind of person who will go to a networking event and kind of talk to everyone and like just kind of start conversations like that. But I think what I've always done that's worked really well is the best time to network with someone is if not everyone else is trying to do that. So in other words, the worst time to network with someone is at a networking event. Don't even bother, because everyone's just trying to shove their business cards and kind of sales pitch in other people's faces, and you're going to forget almost everything. So the best places to network are at the bar, at like some kind of a maybe not like a kind of a panel discussion or talk or something like that, where you have the right people who you want to network with, but there isn't that underlying like kind of thing where people think that they need to network here, and then it just becomes a big mess. So yeah.
can you tell us about some of the biggest benefits you've gained from networking from people you've met?
Oh yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be anywhere near to where I am today if I didn't. I think it was one thing that I did. Gosh, it was probably about 2 years ago now, when I was still at university. Is I sat down and I wrote down what I felt I was very honest with myself, and I tried to write down like, what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, especially what are my weaknesses, because that's a lot more important. And then I kind of came up with strategies of how can I improve them. But ultimately, I want to kind of speak with other people, who can fill those gaps. So that's the best way to build a team, first of all. But I've always I always speak to other people. I always get other people's advice. Another thing that I always say at Revolancer as well to all the people I work with is my number one priority is that the company succeeds. So the company needs to, for the best chance of that happening, the company needs to have the right ideas. And I don't care where the right idea comes from, but I want, people to speak their mind. So even if every single idea I say gets shot down and other people present better ideas, I don't care, because I want the best idea to kind of come forward. So yeah, I'd say it's absolutely instrumental to network with people, and especially to be honest with yourself about your kind of shortcomings, not in a bad sense. Everyone has, is stronger in some things and weaker in others, but kind of find people who can help you in areas that you're weaker, and then you can focus on the areas that you are stronger in, to kind of, yeah, have the best overall chance.
We're kind of taking it back to the school conversation. Like you just mentioned that you want the best ideas, whereas I feel like school kind of wants you to agree with their idea. So, how do you foster that culture of, hey, if you disagree with me, that's fine. We just want the best idea. There's nothing wrong with disagreement. Like, how do you
Oh,
avoid that?
well,
Mhm.
yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I say that. I always make that very clear to new people joining. I also, remind people every now and then that I would like them to speak their mind. Another thing I will do is sometimes I can get I can kind of get a bit talkative, but I will make a conscious effort to try to speak last. So, wait till everyone else has voiced their idea, and then I say what I think. And that tends to work pretty well. But also just, kind of, actions speak louder than words. So, if somebody else voices their opinion, and their idea, really listening to it properly, considering it, talking it through. And then if I do feel that their idea is the right idea, carrying it forward and giving them the credit.
How do you determine like this is a good idea? Like, is it like a consensus among everybody, or is it like more so what you feel? Or
I think it all comes down to kind of logical reasoning. So if they can give a good argument as to why that's the right idea, that's ultimately what it comes down to. Everyone has their own like sort of gut feel about different things, but I think if someone can reason their idea really well, then oftentimes it's worth at least trying, even if I might think it's not the right shot. But I don't know everything. I need to experiment with things to figure out what's right. So yeah.
yeah, I kind of believe your approach is why like a lot of the smaller companies are creating all the most of the major innovations out there. Because I feel like as a company gets bigger and more established, just the guy at the top just it's like what I feel. But with these bigger companies, I guess you have to have a firmer control of the reins because there's so many people there. So, but yeah, I
Yeah.
do feel like the idea sharing is very important.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because, another thing that I always say to the people I work with is if I thought that I was smarter than them, that I knew better than them, I wouldn't be working with them. I'd be going at it by myself. But if I were going at it by myself, I'd be an absolute idiot. So, you need, even if I if like I said, if every idea that I suggest is kind of wrong and doesn't work, as long as there are other people around who present the good ideas, then that's an overall win for me.
So like you mentioned, sometimes ideas fail. How do you avoid like punishing somebody for everybody thought it was a good idea at the time, but it ultimately doesn't work out? Like how do you avoid making them feel like they're a failure?
Well, it's about I think entrepreneurs in general have a different relationship to failure than maybe the average person does. Which is, I see failure as what it is, a learning opportunity, a very valuable learning opportunity. It's not something bad. You try your best. That's the best you can do. If it fails, you learn a lot from it, and next time you have a better chance. So, kind of instilling that in other people around me as well. So failure isn't bad. It's better we try things and fail, because then we can learn and then do it better the next time. So making sure that people aren't afraid to fail and try things, and not feel like they're going to be in trouble if something that they tried didn't work.
Exactly. That's kind of like the huge distinction I see between like business and school. With school, you start off at 100%, and every mistake you made, you're only going downhill from there. So it kind of gives you the mentality, I need to be perfect. I need to do things right the first time. Whereas in reality, that's never going to happen. It's more so like I fail, learn from it, do it a little better, fail, that cycle there.
Absolutely. I mean, I started trying to make money online when I was around 13 or 14 years of age, and the vast majority of things, 95% plus easily of everything I've tried, has failed miserably. But I wouldn't change a thing. I'd try more things, I'd fail more. That's the only thing I'd
Mhm.
change, because it's been such a powerful learning experience. Where now, at a young age, I'm in the position where I started a company. So far, it's going quite well. I still have a lot to learn, but I think compared to other recent graduates, I just simply have a lot more experience from having started so young.
Do you ever have anybody at your company who kind of have that mentality, like I need to do everything perfect the first time? I don't want to fail at anything. And like, how do you readjust their mindset to actually deal with like failure and learn from it?
So typically we don't have people like that, because I can, I ask specific questions in the interview to try and figure out if somebody is like that, because I think you need lots of different people in the world, but in an early stage startup with a very small team, if somebody is too focused on making things perfect, it can create a lot of issues, because
Mhm.
oftentimes what you think is perfect in your mind isn't perfect. What you need to do is put something really sloppy and minimal together so you can launch it quickly, and then see how customers will react to it, and then
Mm.
adjust it accordingly. And that's the best way to learn. So I kind of look for people who think more in that way, especially at this stage. But yeah, I do kind of also say every now and then, that don't let perfect be the enemy of good enough.
The that paralysis by perfectionism, that's something that I've had to work through with this podcast, because you see people who have like these huge budgets, they have all the fancy equipment, they have teams, and you can't really compete with that. So you just have to put something out that you have. It's not going to be perfect. What perfection often does is it gives you an excuse not to do it in the first place. Like, well, I need to do X, Y, and Z, and then you just never do it because the bar is so high to actually start in your mind.
Absolutely. And the other thing to also keep in mind is that there's a very good chance that you are your worst critic. There's a very good chance
Mhm.
that a lot of the things you think are wrong with something, or not perfect with something, other people won't even notice. And other people will just kind of focus on the good things about something. So I think it's always worth just trying and seeing what the response is, and then adjusting it accordingly. I mean, the people who have big podcasts, chances are they didn't, it wasn't kind of like they just kind of woke up one morning and then they have a huge successful podcast. It had to start from somewhere, it had to kind of build up. But if you don't let yourself go along that journey because you're worried that it won't be perfect in the first place, then you won't go on the journey and you won't ever get there. So best chance of getting there is to let yourself go on that journey and embrace that things aren't perfect yet, and they won't ever be, but
Yep.
it'll always get better over time.
Exactly. And I also feel like we often compare ourselves to like their mature product. Like they've been at it for 10 years. And if you're just starting, there's no way that you're going to be able to do what they do. It just takes time to progress and, incrementally get better. So like,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. What are some of the like the other mental issues that you see that people have that kind of disqualify? Well, I don't want to say disqualify them, but that they can work on to be more job ready.
um I mean, one thing that's important to acknowledge is, I think that in a startup, we tend to look for different things to maybe what a big company looks for. But I think one of the education system's biggest crimes, in my opinion, is the complete stifling of creativity. And and I think as kids we tend to be quite creative, and we think
Mhm.
outside the box. And then as we grow up, kind of part of quote unquote becoming an adult is letting go of that and kind of be thinking more, realistically and so on. I
Mhm.
think that's a real shame, because I think there is a huge benefit in thinking creatively and kind of being a bit more of a dreamer. So I think that the education system plays a large role in stifling creativity and kind of making people more mature in a negative sense in that regard. So yeah, I mean, I think that that's another thing that kind of you get graduates sometimes who are just so kind of by the book,
Mhm.
and can't think creatively, can't problem solve effectively. And I think in a large part that's just because of what the education system has done to them.
Exactly. I kind of feel like the education system, they're out to kind of create like walking Wikipedias, like people that walk and they can regurgitate all the facts, but can you actually do something? That's another failure I see of the educational system. They don't allow you to take your creative idea and do something with it. Like, okay, you got this idea, now go get you a team together and try to make a product of it. And
Yeah, and it's a real shame, because I think that if there was more of that in the education system, it would just have huge benefits for the economy, for people's happiness, for all kinds of things.
like I know a reason that a lot of people don't start their projects, like they have a vision, they want to do something, is because they feel failure, because their whole life, like the education system, the more you fail, the lower your grade is, and the lower you're looked at, you might get a spanking at home if you get low grades. So they associate fear and failure together. Like if I fail, that's bad. And but like you mentioned, failure actually taught you several important lessons you wouldn't have learned otherwise. And it's kind of like the path to success, especially in entrepreneurship. So, like,
Yeah.
if you were to teach, like, say, some students, or like if you were to mentor someone, like, and they have that old mentality of associating fear and failure, how would you get them over that mental hurdle?
I mean, it's a very good question. Um, I think it's just so one thing that someone taught me, which I think, has made a huge impact in my life. It was right before I went for a university pitch competition where I could win some kind of seed funding for my business. And it was about £13,000. So that's, roughly the maybe $15,000 or so. And in the grand scheme of things for company seed funding, that's nothing. But at the time, that was more money than I'd ever seen in my life. And it was this huge deal of like, this could make such a big difference to this business. So naturally, I really played that up in my head, and I got very nervous about the pitch, because it was such a big make or break situation. And what this guy taught me, is there's a Buddhist, I think it's originally a Buddhist concept of detachment. And I'm a very kind of logically thinking person, so this initially I was very skeptical about this actually working for me, because I've tried meditation and things in the past. It just never worked for me. I
Mm.
don't know what it is, but regardless, essentially what the detaching from the outcome is like in that example, I was really, I kind of thought either I win this £13,000 and and I can kind of kickstart my business and hire other people, and it leads to all these great things, or I don't get it, in which case that's awful because I can't take the business further and yada yada. That's kind of how I played it in my mind.
Mm.
But what detaching from the outcome is just really thinking about what is it that you have that you are grateful for, and and that you would have either way. So I was thinking, I'm healthy, I'm happy, I'm in a good position in life regardless. I can still start this business, and it's basically just getting to terms with, like, if I were to fail at this, it wouldn't really matter.
Mhm.
There are still so many good things that I have. There are still things I can do in that case to get my business to the next level. Might take longer, but so what? There are always obstacles. And then I got myself into the mindset where I didn't really put that much weight on whether I won or didn't win. And I thought more about, I'm passionate about this business. I want to tell these people who are interested in listening to me about my cool idea. And that's basically all there was to it. So I wasn't nervous when I did the actual pitch, and I ended up winning it. And I think that's something that I would definitely try and teach people, is that's a good, that's an important step to not being afraid of failure. Because, like, let's say you want to start a business, and you're scared that, oh, it might fail. If it fails, you're just kind of where you were had you not tried. But if you don't try,
Mhm.
you might regret it for the rest of your life, especially if you're quite young and you don't yet have a responsibility of a family, kids, things like that, where you need to be more responsible. And so, and in that case, you might regret it. So there's a Wayne Gretzky quote, you miss all of the shots you don't take, which is just so very
Mhm.
true. And that choosing not to do something is a choice as well, you know. But if you try something, you at least have a fighting chance of succeeding, and then you won't ever regret not trying. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And we have no issues spending time and money on things that we're just going to consume and throw away. So why not spend that same time and money on something that might, completely change your life? Start a business, start a podcast, whatever. If it fails, like you mentioned, you're in the exact same place, at least. But I would say, in fact, you're in a better place because you kind of have that knowledge of this didn't work, so I can adjust my game plan and try something different, and this might get me on the path to success. And something I also find is that we all, like you mentioned, outcome independence. I've had to train my mind to be reward independent, like meaning I'm not focused on getting that reward. It's going to come in its due time. I just have to enjoy the process, and then the reward will come on its own. Because if you're too reward focused, when things don't happen exactly how you want to, you start getting discouraged. Like, oh, my podcast isn't blowing up. I'm not making all of this money right now. But little do you know, like if you had waited a little while down the line, that's when you would have been rewarded if you stuck to your guns.
Mhm. No, absolutely. Because that you can always get ups and downs, but if you really love the journey, then you'll always keep going. And I mean, the most important thing with starting any kind of project, or, with anything in life, really, is consistency. With, like,
Mhm.
starting a business, it's a marathon, not a race. You don't need to work 16-hour days. You don't need to, like, drink lots of caffeine and not sleep and kind of be
Mhm.
there the whole time. You don't. It's because you're just going to burn yourself out. So then it's just wasted, and you're going to just feel awful. So it's much better to work 8 hours a day, work 9 hours a day, 10 hours a day, 4 hours a day, whatever time you have, when you can still spend time on other things that matter, and then just do it consistently over time. And you're going to have a much, much better chance that way. And you're going to feel a lot better doing that as well.
Exactly. It's like, you have a garden. You can't like make the plant grow faster by giving it more water. The fruits are gonna come when they come. And like you mentioned, burning yourself out. A lot of people, they, especially in America, it's like grind, 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 work, 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 work. Like there's almost zero work-life balance. But I kind of feel like your body and your mind, they give you warning signals. You start feeling tired, you start feeling dreary. That's it's your mind saying, hey, slow down. And if the old school American mentality is just blast past it, ignore it. You just got to keep going, and that's just going to make you feel even more depressed. And once you get into that severe burnout, you're just going to absolutely hate what you're doing, and you're going to stop. So, like,
Yeah, I mean, it's work smart, not hard. It's
mhm.
the, I mean, ideally both, right? But if you can only pick one, then definitely pick smart. One thing I've noticed with myself is, different people need different amounts of sleep to function effectively. But what I've noticed for me is I need 8 hours. If I get less than 8 hours, I notice the impact. So, like, let's say, for example, if I get 8 hours, I can do in 6 hours what would normally take me 8 hours. It would
Mhm.
take me 8 hours otherwise if I only got 6 hours of sleep, kind of thing. So, if you take good care of yourself and you don't burn yourself out, you can achieve much more in less time. It's not sort of, hours worked aren't really comparable. It's about the quality of work. It's about what you're actually getting done. Um, and at that point, you have to take care of yourself. I mean, many of the most successful people that I know, they don't subscribe to this grind culture at all, and they have a mindset much more similar to what I'm kind of basing it on, essentially. Um, which is it's a marathon, not a sprint. And in a marathon, you need to pace yourself. You need to rest. You need to eat properly, drink properly. You need to basically take good care of yourself. Take it slow and just be consistent. But I think lots of people, they just try and sprint, but eventually you're going to you might get like a bit further at the beginning faster, but eventually you're going to burn yourself out, and then it's just you're just going to feel awful. You're not going to get where you want to go. It's just a big mess. So just pace yourself.
Is that something like you actively encourage at your company? Like, hey, you guys are working a little too long. Go ahead and take a break, take a vacation. Like, how do you make sure all your
Yes.
people? Mhm.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Especially, if I start noticing that someone isn't perhaps performing as well as they were, I don't know, last week or last month, then I would encourage them to take some time off, because I think it's just so important to recharge. And I think that if people are well rested, they sort of have time to recharge, they're happy, then they do their best work in the time that they're at work, and they don't need to stay super late or kind of work extra, because it's about how productive you are in the allocated work hours, not how many hours you work. But like I
Mhm.
said, like an hour of work isn't really equivalent to another hour of work. It's all about what you get done.
Exactly. Yeah, the ultimate product is, the product is ultimately what matters. It's not just, oh, you work 14 hours, but 8 of those hours you're barely doing anything because you're so tired and burnt out. So yeah, I definitely agree that
Exactly.
getting sleep, eating properly. Do you take steps to like help your employees eat better? Because I know like kind of food is something that fuels the brain.
Yeah, I mean, not directly, but it is something that I actively encourage, which is just taking care of yourself and making sure that
Mhm.
you have a good kind of work-life balance, because I really do feel like, and you might sort of listen to that and think, oh, I'm just being nice. But even if you think about it from like a purely capitalistic kind of profit-driven perspective, I do believe that if people are well rested, if people are happy, they do their best work. So even if you're thinking about it from a purely money-making perspective, you should try and make people happy, because then they do their best work, and ultimately that's what's best for the company. So I'm not saying that's my kind of angle here. Either it's definitely something in the middle, but nonetheless, that I think that my company has certainly benefited from encouraging a good work-life balance and encouraging a healthy lifestyle.
Uh, I know like a lot of companies, it's like obviously businesses have to make money, but some companies go overboard on the profits, focus on the profits to where, the employees start feeling expendable, like they don't matter. They're just there to make the company profits, and they can be let go at any time or any of that. So like how do you avoid like falling into that mentality where it's all about the money. You guys don't really matter.
Yeah, I think I'm just disconnected for a little bit.
Okay, you know.
But yeah, I mean, ultimately, you know, a company is a collection of people who try, you know, are coming together and trying to solve a problem together. So, you know, a company without the people is nothing. So, you know, I don't for a second think that anyone who works at the company is expendable. If I thought that, they wouldn't be working at the company. You know, so I I think it's just about being you know, really listening to people, acknowledging when they do good work, making them feel valued, are all very important things. But ultimately, just acknowledging that the company wouldn't be anywhere without the amazing people who work very hard to you know to keep bringing it to the next level, because I certainly couldn't do everything by myself. You know,
Mhm.
again, I know what my strengths are, I know what my weaknesses are. The people who work with me, what their strengths are, I could not do better than them at all, and that's very much by design. I actively look for people who can do things that I can't do, you know, because that's what's best for the company.
Exactly. And I think it's, you know, like you mentioned, it's important to gauge the temperature of everybody and to be mindfully aware that their health matters too. Like, what's the point of money if everybody's sick? You know, nobody likes working there. It's just a miserable environment. Like, you know, companies, they do have to make money, but you know, the purpose of money is to help people, and to an extent, you know what I mean? Like, you know, if you have all
Yeah.
the money but everybody around you is miserable, like what are you really, you know, like what are you really enjoying? Life is miserable because everybody else is miserable. So
Yeah, it's just a bad way of being, you know. It's you can get so much further by, you know, keeping people happy, being collaborative. You really take the company so much further than like trying to use people, make a bit of money, but you don't know what would be possible if you actually had a happy and encouraged workforce. You don't know how much further you could actually go.
have you ever thought of like creating a project to kind of fill in those gaps of the you know the current educational system, something like maybe with coaching or you know, offering courses that kind of help them work on these soft skills and these other, you know, mental skills that they may not have?
I have thought about it a lot. I definitely want to do something about it in the future. The issue that I'm struggling with right now is I don't know what the best way of doing it is. It's something that I do think about a lot. Um, I suppose the issue is that the education system is so ingrained into culture, it's ingrained into the law. You know, it's not really
Mhm.
like you know, a kid can just choose not to go to school and to kind of learn in a different way. So I really, yeah, I mean, the honest answer is I don't know yet. I don't know yet what I feel is the best solution to it, but I definitely want to do something about it. Because I just feel like that, you know, that right now people are really being underserved by the current system, and also because some people, you know, I think that school works well for a small minority of people who have very
Mhm.
specific learning style. It works somewhat well for maybe like the majority, and then there's a, you know, pretty sizable group of people who just don't learn in the ways that school teaches in. But you know, they're not unintelligent, they're smart, they just learn in different ways, but they're just completely underserved by school. And I think that's a real tragedy that, you know, that those people aren't served properly by the education system. So I absolutely want to do something about it, but you know, it's something that I'm going to continue thinking about what the best way is, and then eventually I will do something.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point you made about like the different learning styles. Because I noticed, like you mentioned earlier, some of the people that didn't necessarily do good in school are doing great outside of school, like in business and life in general. I think that the huge misconception is that school is the only great way of handling life, which is not true.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, it's not true. I mean, yeah, and I think it's a shame also that the education system, that's the message it, perpetuates. It's like, it's so important that you do well at school. It's so important that you do good at university, because that's what's going to make the difference in your life. But it's like the story I told earlier with my friend's dad. He is incredibly successful. I can't even begin to think how much money he has, and he didn't traditionally do well, in the education system. But what he didn't work hard, he worked smart. He kind of
Mm.
connected the dots. He found an opportunity and then hired people who could deliver that opportunity, deliver on that better than he could. So that's, you can do very well by doing things like that. But one thing that has always puzzled me, why not, why this isn't something more people think, is in school, everybody does exactly the same thing. At
Mm.
university, you're going to graduate alongside hundreds, maybe thousands of people with the same degree title in your university, and then tens, maybe even hundreds of thousands of people, in your country, again, same degree title. And then there are thousands of people the year before who graduated with the same degree title. Like, how exactly is that useful? How are you differentiating yourself there?
Mm.
You just aren't.
Yeah.
um, so that's something I've never understood. I mean, I've always been kind of attracted to the idea of doing things differently and actually doing something new, because I just feel that's more useful. Rather than doing a science experiment, for example, in chemistry class, which the teacher already knows the answer. Everyone alongside me is doing the exact same thing. Why would I waste my time doing that? That's already been
Mm.
documented. Why don't I kind of try and do something different? Um, but yeah, school just doesn't, the education system just doesn't think that way.
Yeah, I think the modern school system was, or yeah, the modern school system was kind of birthed out of the an age where they need factory workers. They don't need
Mhm.
thinkers. They need people who can withstand tedium. So it's just like sit there, read the book, do this worksheet, be quiet, don't talk, and that's what they want in those factories and those kind of places. Hey, don't talk amongst each other, just do the job. Because a lot of times when people start talking, that's when, oh, hey, we're getting underpaid, or
Mhm.
I told you to do something, and then they disagree with, the management, and it causes all kinds of problems. So I think, school isn't really catered to the student, it's catered to corporations and creating a work, a labor force for them. And, you know, it works great for them, but for you as the individual, it kind of limits you. That's what I found. Like, makes you afraid to explore new ideas. It makes you afraid to even present an idea in the first place in the business arena.
Yeah, and it's a real shame. It truly is. It's something that I wish I could change, and especially now, in the modern day, where automation is a thing now. If you
Mm.
want an article written, ChatGPT can do it for you. A lot of the kind of not so much thinking work, the doing work is being automated. So I think now it is more important than ever to really nurture people's creativity and their their ability to problem solve and think differently, because that stuff is harder to automate, and that's what's going to, I think that's what's going to allow them to pursue something that gives them purpose, in life. In the modern world, where so much of the stuff that in the past, we had to do manually, can now just be automated, and it will just the level of automation will keep increasing over time.
Yeah, exactly. I kind of feel like people have to start taking initiative. Like they can't wait on the system or somebody else to do it for them. They have
Mhm.
to manually go out there, network with a few people and say, hey guys, let's try this out. If it fails, oh well, but at least make the effort put something together of your own and learn and experiment, because if you just follow the system's agenda for you isn't necessarily the best one.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, hopefully, I definitely want to do something about this. I hope that I will come up with the answers sooner rather than later. But yeah, I think right now it's broken, but I think this is a starting point, just having a conversation about it and really getting people to think about it, because I don't expect everyone who's listening to this to agree with my view on the education system. But what I hope that what I hope to achieve with this conversation is just to get people to start thinking about it. Don't think inherently that school and the education system is great and this traditional way of doing things is great. Have a think about it. Think about it critically, and maybe after you think about it critically, you will arrive at the opinion that it is still great, and that's fine. But at least then you have spent the time thinking it through for yourself, rather than just repeating and parroting what you've been told.
Exactly. I think that's a great note to end this show. Did you have any closing thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's been really good to come on your show again. Thanks very much for having me. And hope you have a great rest of your day.
No, same to you, man. I'm glad to have you on again, man. We have to keep on doing this because I believe there's some really good conversations here.
Sounds good to me.
All right. We'll catch y'all next time. Peace.